I'm making this video because although I've been through a lot in my life, probably more than 90-95% of the people in this world, today would be my father's 76th birthday. He's been gone for 46 years. And I've had time to reflect. I've grown into the man that I am now through different changes. As a youth, there was no grief support, and in many ways families just tried to move on from the trauma of a death. Didn't really talk about it with kids. I was 7 years old and I was very much aware of my world, and I needed that explanation. I needed to know what was going on. Members of my family, when the funeral was going on and my mom was at the funeral, made the choice for me to not be able to go to the funeral home, which traumatized me because it would have, I think in my mind, it would have given me a visual that he was gone. And it would have closed some doors. But not seeing him at that age, I thought maybe there was something else going on. Something I never really reflected to anyone in my family. I was very angry that he was gone and I was not allowed to participate my grief into the process. People, I think, didn't know how to sympathize or empathize with people who lost someone back then. At least not with a 7-year-old. And I had a lot of anger because of that. In growing up, we were living in one city, and when he passed, my mother gave the choice of going to one city or the other. We went back to my hometown, and being without my dad was a big adjustment. I got teased quite a bit by kids because I think, number one, I was too young. I had more of a nerdy way about myself, and I think most kids my age didn't understand how devastating the loss of my father was and what was going on. And I got bullied significantly, more verbal than anything else. And I always had this mindset that I'm here, and what you do is hurtful, but it's not going. I think it was, I don't want to let this define me. And I got to junior high, and my gym teacher was also the junior high baseball team coach, and he made me the last guy to make the baseball team, and that gave me some confidence. I think he knew there were things going on with me with not having a dad. He always tried to be very understanding without intruding. It's a hard situation for a teacher to be in. But in some ways, he was one of my first mentors. Though I had, I had no idea of direction even at 15, 16 years old. My mom remarried about that time, and we moved to a bigger city, which was harder for me. Um, the kids there were had a little bit more money, and they seemed a bit snobbier. And I'm generally take me as I am kind of guy, and I think that may have bothered some of the kids there. And I honestly am not gregarious as far as meeting people. I think much of it has to do with the loss of my father, the experiences I had early in school with bullying, um, and being in a new area, and being like any kid, I wanted to fit in. I did like to drink, and I in the new city, I had more opportunities to drink with people, and people found me more acceptable, more social when I was drinking. I got involved with someone who was less than honest with me, and when I tried to call her out on it, she was not honest or forthright. I wouldn't say she was dishonest. She just decided not to tell the truth. And I held on to some things for a long time. Not in bitterness, but thinking that something would change. Because she wouldn't answer what I asked. And it wasn't done in a demanding way. I just wanted to know so I could move on. And and because she didn't answer, it accelerated the way I drank. That's not her fault, that's my fault. I should have probably been able to just accept it for what it was, but there's a side of me that wanted an answer. It was similar to what happened with my father. I didn't get a complete answer, I didn't get feedback. And so when that happens, you're left wondering. And through many difficult years, I got to the point where I finally realized I'd had enough of the drinking. Combination of two things happened. My sister got married. I was at the reception at her in-laws' home, and I got so drunk I passed out at the reception. And that was embarrassing for me. Because usually when things like that happen, I was with friends. And this was a big event in my sister's life. Shortly thereafter, they announced that she was pregnant. Well, that was, again, part of my shame and part of my desire to be more of who I was. I wanted to get the help I needed. And it was fortunate for me at that time. Many hospitals started creating clinics where you can go in to get substance abuse treatment. And the government has set up where, based on your income, it would be very affordable. And so for 2 years, I did outpatient treatment, and I worked it the way I should. Um, a few months after I was in there was an article written by Mitch Albom about a Detroit Red Wings player at the time in 1987 who had had problems with alcohol. He was one of my favorite players, and he had never done any sort of interview. And he detailed his struggle with alcoholism, which I found to be very courageous and honest. And because, yeah, partly because he was my favorite player, it gave me motivation to be strong, and no matter what happened, battle through it. So for about a year and a half, I was doing rather well. I'm learning all sorts of new ways to fit into normal society because my drinking did not allow me to do things that most people would find socially acceptable. I was modifying my behavior and my character and working to make myself into a decent human being. I worked on my anger. I worked on not cussing so much, and things were going rather well. About a year and a half in, I was heading home from work. A gal in what was not considered a great area of Detroit, her car had died. She was near a gas station, and I stopped to see if I could help her. She, in turn, said, "No, thank you, I've got a friend coming." It was kind of a cold, rainy November night. So I get back into my vehicle and I do a turnaround to start heading home, and something in my head said, I can't just leave her. So I turned back around again in a moment, and I said, I know this is a bad area, you don't trust me, but I'm going to park in the gas station, and if you want, you can hop in my truck. Well, after maybe a half an hour or so, her car was pretty cold. Her car wasn't turning over, so she taps on my window and asks me if she could sit in my car, and I said yeah. I said we'll stay right here, and I happened to be wearing a Bob Probert jersey, and she goes, "So, what do you do for a living?" I told her I was working for Little Caesars, and she goes, "You must be a big fan of his." And I said, "Oh yeah." And I detailed the article that Bob had interviewed for, and told her that I was sober because partly because of that. And she goes, "He comes into where I work all the time." She goes, "If you give my name, the guys will let you come in without a cover, and if he's there, I will introduce you." She goes, "If you come in," she goes, "I can buy you some cokes. I know you don't drink, you know, even if he isn't there." And I go, "Okay." So I ended up staying with her for a few hours till her friend got there, and the next week I was heading home from work again, and I was listening to the Wings game, and it was it got over just before about halfway home, and they lost. And I thought, what the heck, I'll go into her place and see if she's there, see if he's in there. And I walk in there, and I'm wearing the Proper jersey, and she sees me and waves at me, and walking in right behind me was Bob Probert and Sheldon Kennedy. And right away she goes, Bob, this is your biggest fan. And he looks at me and he sees the jersey and he just kind of runs his eyes up and down on me. He sees the jersey and a big grin and goes, no shit. And he goes, we're getting a booth. Would you like to sit with us? And for me, it was an easy answer. Sure. So I sit down and Bob asked me why I was such a big fan, and I said, well, of course your play, but also the article you wrote, I thought it was very courageous, and I thought it could help other people, and that I had been recovering for a year and a half, and because he was my favorite player, it meant a lot to me, and we started talking about my recovery dates and some of the things that happened with my father, that he'd passed, and he was very supportive and encouraging. And also, he told me, he goes, I know your recovery date. He goes, I'm gonna beat your time clean. And so that was motivation for me. And I have been clean before I met him and ever since. And in the time after, I experienced many things, and many times when I thought something was too hard, I thought of the encouragement that he gave me. That was one of the first times when I sat down and talked to him that somebody talked to me and acknowledged me and really heard what I was saying. And it was funny. About 8 years later, I got hired in at Nice Arena as a Zamboni driver. My first day on the job, my boss, who played minor league hockey with Bob, was giving me the grand tour, and Zamboni was getting ready to go out on the ice, and there was an adult man and two younger boys out on the ice. And as the Zamboni's coming out, he must have recognized Mark, and he came over, I think, to say something to Mark, and he saw me and goes, what the hell are you doing here? And I go, this is my first day on the job. And my boss was going, he knows you, knowing Bob's history. And I told Bob yes. And he goes, golly, he's good. And skated away with a kind of laughing grin. And it made my day. 8 years after, he remembered who I was. He was like the brother I never had. And in the time after, my friend Sean Belegian, who I worked with at Little Caesars, did charity work with Bob. And when Bob was going through his stuff, and that was early in my recovery, I defended Bob vociferously. They went after Bob, I'd go after whoever their sport team or sports heroes were. Didn't matter. I knew how hard things were that Bob was having to juggle. And Sean told me, you were right about him. You had him pegged. He's just a great guy. When Bob passed 5 years ago, it hurt me. He had given me courage to move forward, and I didn't think I could. And one of the things that I related to him was that I wanted to go back to school and become someone who worked with kids and help keep them from some of the mistakes I made with drinking and whatnot. Just not having a role model. So shortly after, I hooked up with a nonprofit through Henry Ford called Sandcastles. And it was short training, and pretty much a lot of the stuff they do was a lot of the stuff that I did when I was in counseling for my alcohol. Be able to we do activities, and we reflect, and we do all sorts of things with the kids to help them talk about the grief, because as a child, grief can sometimes be a hard thing to talk about. Sometimes kids openly want to talk about it, and other times they don't. And I'm the type of person, I'm going to throw it out there, because I love my dad. My dad was a tremendous person. And I've been doing that for about 4 years. And it was great. Well, partway through my 4 years, I started having mood swings. It was like I was two different people. I wasn't sure what it was. Don't really have health care or anything like that. And a friend of mine, Kirk David, who I followed because he had interviewed Jim Northrup, and Jim went to school with my dad. And I just wanted to get a little bit of an idea what Jim was like. And we had talked at different times. Well, he invited me to hear Eric Hipple speak. Eric Hipple wrote a book, Real Men Don't Cry. Well, and it's about his own struggle with depression. I had known that his son had committed suicide, so I thought that's what it was about. Well, when Eric got talking, he talked about, at times, over the most outrageous things. He wanted to hurt himself. Just things that you shouldn't want. It shouldn't drive you to want to commit suicide. And it struck a chord with me. And so I went to my doctor, and Eric had suggested a few different drugs that might work for me, and I settled that Zoloft, and in 2 months there was a remarkable change. It was unbelievable. It was like the cloud lifted. And since then, I gave it about a year. I realized that I did want to go back to school. So in doing that, I gave myself time on the drug to see where it would take me, whether it would be effective long term, and nothing much changed. So I believe it was just deficiency, probably in serotonin. Uh, Mostly because since my recovery, I worked 2 jobs, so a lot of times I didn't get the kind of sleep I needed, and I've since learned that I need my sleep. And part of what Zoloft does is helps put you on a more regular sleep cycle. I feel better that way. Uh, After about a year, I realized I wanted to go back to school, and it wasn't changing, and I had to give it a shot. So I talked to a counselor. We kind of figured it out, and after I let it go for a little bit, I go, "This is what I need to do." And when I went back, because of my drinking and my inattention to school, my grades are really horrible. And I was on what they classified as academic dismissal. He goes, "I can okay you for one class." He goes, "But," he goes, "to get off academic dismissal, you have to you have to pull a 2.0 for 2 classes at least, and then you'll be eligible for a Pell Grant." Well, the first class, English 101, went really well. Um, Teacher, she was actually focused on, she did a lot of focusing on serial murders, and we had to do research on these murders. Well, a lot of these murderers had backgrounds like mine: inattention, drinking, uh, you know, not much guidance. So, in that respect, it was kind of like I made it through that. I could have, things could have been so much worse. And and I got through the class. I got a B, and once we kind of knew that I had passed that class, we started to set up a plan, a scholastic plan for me. And so in the spring, I took I've taken sociology. As of right now, I'm pulling about a B. Hopefully, I can get up higher, but if I pull a B, that's still a 3.0. I should be good, and then I can move forward. I will be able to get a Pell Grant, 2 more semesters. I will have academic forgiveness. My poor grades from the past will be gone. Not that I will forget them, but to me, I've always been the type that I don't want to give up. Don't, you know, like the song, "Don't Stop Believing." We have to have something to believe in. On top of all this, I went back to church, and some of the messages there before I went back to school, those also enlightened me and made me realize the path I was on was better. And for people who don't believe in God, I respect your belief in things, but I know for me there is a God, and part of it is it's free will. You you set your own path. And for a long time, because I didn't have someone to guide me and give me direction when I was younger, I just kind of meandered through life. And I don't want to do that anymore. And I want others to find the way to get away from the alcohol, the booze, people who are destroy the productive ways in which you can think. You need to be clear of them. You need to get those people out of your life. Negative things will happen, and if you have positive people around you, you will find support. There's no reason why anyone can't lift themselves up. For all I've been through, there's no excuse. You gotta do it. You gotta rise up.